In the late autumn of 1894, beneath the rolling fog that clung to the hills of Arkansas Ridge, lived a quiet widow named Evelyn Crowe. Her small farmhouse stood alone at the edge of a worn dirt road, shutters creaking against the wind. Villagers whispered that grief had changed her. She rarely spoke, always wandering behind her creaking fence to tend a garden no one else dared approach. Evelyn had been married to Thomas Crowe, a logger with a hearty laugh and strong hands that smelled of pine resin. His death in a sawmill accident left her hollow, a woman surviving on borrowed breaths. She kept the garden because Thomas once promised to help her plant a field of marigolds and tulips across their land. It became the last piece of him she could still hold. However, nothing bloomed there anymore. The soil, once fertile, had turned cold and hard. Yet every sunrise, Evelyn returned to the dirt, digging and praying for life to return, even if it never did. One evening, while pushing her hoe into stubborn earth, Evelyn struck something solid. She brushed away the dirt, expecting a rock. What surfaced instead was white and smooth, shaped like a small curved rod. A bone. Her pulse quickened. It looked human, though small enough that she hoped it belonged to a stray animal. She wrapped it in cloth and buried it once more, whispering, "This garden will grow flowers, not death." Rain came that night. Thunder cracked the sky, rattling the windows. When dawn arrived, the widow stepped outside and froze. More bones had surfaced, scattered like roots pushed upward by some unseen force. Ribs, vertebrae, tiny finger bones curled like wilted petals. She collapsed to her knees, soil clinging to her dress. The earth had chosen its harvest. The villagers always suspected the land was cursed. Many years before, the ridge was a Civil War skirmish site where bodies never received proper burial. Children were warned to stay away, lest they wake the ground. When a local boy named Caleb Finch spotted Evelyn's yard from afar, he sprinted to the trading post shouting about the widow's boneyard. Within hours, a ring of judgment formed around her home: gawkers, whisperers, and those who craved scandal. "She digs up the dead," one woman hissed. "She talks to spirits," another spat. "She has finally gone mad," muttered a man. No one dared approach her directly. They only pointed from the road, fear painting their imaginations. Evelyn remained silent. Grief had already taken everything from her, so there was nothing left the villagers could steal with their gossip. That night, Evelyn sat at her candlelit table, clutching Thomas's favorite gardening trowel. Memories softened the sharpness of her fear. She recalled her husband's smile as he presented her with a single marigold on their wedding day, promising to fill their home with many more. "It is life that keeps us rooted," Thomas once said. Her heart ached. Bones in the earth were reminders that life could be stolen without mercy. Yet something inside her resisted despair. With trembling hands, she crafted a small bouquet from dried weeds and placed it in a jar. A poor substitute for flowers, yet it represented hope. She stepped outside and set it beside the scattered bones, praying that somewhere beneath death, life still waited. The next morning, a lone traveler arrived on horseback. His coat was dusty from the trail, hat pulled low over tired eyes. His name, he later introduced, was Silas Hargrove, a roving physician studying strange diseases and mortal mysteries across the frontier. He had heard the rumors. Evelyn stiffened as he approached the fence, expecting mockery or threats. Instead, he spoke gently. "I heard your soil refuses to forget the past." His words held neither fear nor condemnation. He asked permission to examine the bones. She hesitated, then nodded, weary of carrying this burden alone. Silas knelt in the garden, brushing soil with practiced hands. His expression darkened. "These bones," he said softly, "belong to children." Evelyn's breath collapsed. She clutched the fence to stay upright as her world grew colder. Silas asked Evelyn to recount everything she knew of the land's history. Evelyn spoke of her late husband buying the property cheaply from an aging land baron who claimed it was haunted by regrets. Silas's brow furrowed. He explained that many impoverished families had once lived in hidden shacks along the ridge, children lost to disease or starvation. Some bodies had never been laid to rest with dignity. "The earth remembers," he said. "Sometimes it remembers too loudly." His words carried no superstition, only sorrowful sincerity. He proposed to help Evelyn rebury the bones properly. She agreed, though dread gnawed at her. For every bone they collected, 3 more seemed to appear. As hours stretched into night, Silas rested inside while Evelyn remained outside, compelled by an unspoken pull. The wind brushed the grass in rhythmic sighs. Then she heard it. Whispers, soft, childlike, so faint she thought they were memories at first. Cold. Alone. Forgotten. Evelyn trembled. Tears welled in her eyes because she recognized that pain too well. Loneliness was a ghost she lived beside every day. Her voice wavered. "You are not forgotten." The wind calmed, almost listening. For the first time since Thomas's passing, Evelyn felt her heart beating not only for herself, but for others who suffered unseen. News traveled fast, too fast. The next morning, Sheriff Dalton Briggs marched through the gate with 2 deputies. His eyes scanned the bones with disgust. "This here is a crime scene," he barked. "You 2 are tampering with remains." Evelyn protested. "I only found them. I did not ask the earth to give me sorrow." Silas stepped forward. "Sheriff, these bones are decades old. They deserve burial, not bureaucracy." Dalton yanked a bone from the soil and scoffed. "Children? Likely livestock. This widow has always been dramatic." Evelyn's heart cracked at the casual cruelty. Sheriff Briggs ordered them to stop work until further notice, then left with a warning. "Keep your dead underground, Widow Crowe. Folks here scare easy." After he left, Evelyn knelt beside the garden and whispered apologies to the bones that still surfaced through the dirt. Defying orders, Silas stayed to examine the remains further that evening. Something unusual caught his attention. The bones were arranged beneath the soil, almost as if placed there deliberately. He uncovered a small metal button, tarnished yet intact. Etched upon it was the insignia of the St. Adeline Orphanage, which burned down 30 years earlier. Records of the children lost had been buried in corruption and silence. "These children suffered," Silas said. "Someone hid them here. Someone wanted them forgotten." Evelyn closed her eyes, newly burdened with the guilt of occupying ground that had cradled injustice. Then Silas noticed something stranger. Tiny buds sprouting near the bones. Not flowers, not weeds. Ivory shoots. Bone white, shaped like petals forming around a center. The garden was trying to grow again. Evelyn touched one of the bone buds. It felt warm, almost alive. She recoiled, startled. Silas whispered, "The children might be reaching for the world they never got to know." Evelyn realized her garden was not cursed. It was calling for remembrance. The bones were rising because they wanted someone to see them, to listen, to mourn them. Her voice cracked. "What do they need from me?" Silas answered softly. "Dignity, a promise that their stories will no longer be buried." As moonlight bathed the soil, the bone blossoms glowed faintly, like tiny lanterns in the dark. Evelyn clasped her hands, heart full of solemn purpose. "If the world forgot you," she whispered to the wind, "then I will remember." The bone flowers swayed as if bowing in gratitude. The next morning, Evelyn rose before the sun. Instead of fear, She felt duty. She gathered cloth scraps, candles, and a wooden cross Thomas once carved. Silas joined her, carrying a lantern and a journal to record every detail. They began placing each bone carefully into baskets lined with linen. Evelyn spoke aloud the same gentle blessing for every piece. You mattered. You are seen, Silas watched her with solemn respect. This widow, who had once tended lifeless soil, now nurtured forgotten souls. Her compassion became the only warmth the lost children had ever known. The garden felt quieter. The earth no longer strained. The bone blossoms bowed like seedlings satisfied by a caretaker's touch. Their work did not go unnoticed. Sheriff Briggs returned with a group of townsfolk, each carrying lanterns as if storming a monster's lair. Briggs raised his voice. "This is grave tampering. You are disturbing sacred ground and frightening decent people." Evelyn stepped forward despite trembling. These children never received sacred ground. They were thrown away. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, others darkened with suspicion. Silas's voice remained measured. The orphanage fire was no accident. Someone buried the shame on this ridge. The truth has a way of rising. Briggs scowled. End this. Now Evelyn shook her head. I cannot. They deserve better than silence. Briggs spat at the ground and left, promising legal action. The crowd dispersed, torn between fear and conscience. Clouds rolled in heavy and low, locking out the stars. A sudden wind swept the hillside, carrying voices Evelyn no longer feared. They are restless, Silas observed. The earth trembled like a heartbeat. Then, in astonishing rhythm, hundreds of tiny bone buds burst from the soil, unfolding into delicate white blossoms shaped like skeletal lilies. Their glow brightened the entire ridge as if moonlight now sprang from ground instead of sky. Silas whispered, "They are blooming for deliverance." Evelyn fell to her knees, tears streaming, overwhelmed by beauty born from tragedy. Every flower was a tribute to a child's life that had once flickered in darkness. Silas placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You gave them this." She shook her head. "I only listened." Determined to uncover the truth, Silas traveled into town at dawn and searched through dusty county archives. After hours of digging, he discovered a ledger from St. Adeline Orphanage. It listed children never adopted, never claimed after death, and never reported missing. Names scratched into paper with indifference. More horrifying was the signature at the bottom. Dalton Briggs, the sheriff's father, who served as orphanage steward before becoming a landowner. The children had been victims of neglect and misuse of funds. When plague hit the orphanage, the elder Briggs disposed of the bodies secretly to avoid scandal and protect wealth. Silas returned to the ridge with evidence heavy in his hands. Silas presented the ledger to Evelyn. Her jaw tightened with righteous anger. Thomas once called her gentle, but grief had tempered her into steel. Sheriff Briggs soon arrived again, red-faced and fuming. Evelyn stepped forward, holding the ledger high. "This is your family's truth," she declared. "Your father let these children die, then buried their memory beneath greed. You have forced their silence for decades." Briggs froze, complexion draining. Villagers who had followed him listened in stunned quiet. Some gasped, realizing they had judged the wrong person for too long. Briggs tried to speak, but words tangled in his throat. His legacy of power had just collapsed beneath the weight of innocence wronged. Together, the villagers, Silas and Evelyn, arranged a proper funeral on the ridge. Coffins were carved from cedar. Candlelit lanterns lined the rows. Hymns once reserved for cherished children were sung through cracked voices. Evelyn spoke last. "These little ones deserved love. Let this ground become a garden of remembrance, not a grave of shame." Bone blossoms covered the mounds like pale bouquets. For the first time in decades, the ridge did not groan. It exhaled peace. Evelyn felt Thomas watching with quiet pride. Love, she realized, extended far beyond a life cut short. Weeks passed. Rain softened the earth again. Where bones once emerged, real flowers began to sprout. Marigolds, tulips, wild violets. Colors Thomas had once promised now brightened the hillside exactly as he dreamed. Silas smiled as Evelyn marveled at the garden. "Life is stubborn," he said. "It finds its way through darkness." The villagers offered seeds and gardening tools as apologies for their cruelty. Evelyn accepted with gratitude, knowing healing grows slowly yet steadily. The children rested. The town awakened. Silas prepared to continue his travels. His horse was saddled, and satchel packed full of notes about Arkansas Ridge. Evelyn approached him with fresh lavender in hand. "You gave my heart purpose again," she said. Silas bowed his head. "You taught me that science must serve the forgotten, not only the living." There was no romance between them, only deep respect carved through shared struggle. He promised to return someday and rode down the dusty road, his silhouette shrinking into the horizon. Evelyn watched until he vanished, then returned to her blooming garden of memories. The sheriff resigned from his post. He began helping with the memorial grounds, seeking forgiveness rather than authority. Evelyn offered him grace. She understood that redemption grows best in soil watered with humility. Children from the village now visited often, bringing painted stones and tiny crosses. They ran through vibrant blossoms that swayed in gentle breezes. Laughter replaced whispers. Evelyn tended the garden daily. Her hands no longer shook from sorrow. Every flower reminded her that grief can teach love to stretch further, not shrink. One late afternoon, as the sky glowed gold like a promise kept, Evelyn discovered a single marigold growing near her porch. It stood taller than the others, its petals the exact shade Thomas had once placed in her hair. At the base of its stem lay a small wooden token, smoothed by time. When she lifted it, her breath caught. It was the carving Thomas had begun before he died, a heart and the initials E+T intertwined. Evelyn pressed it to her chest. The land had not only given voice to lost children, it had returned a fragment of the love she thought she would never feel again. Her garden had grown bones into blossoms, sorrow into remembrance, and loneliness into community. She looked across the ridge, a peaceful garden rooted in truth. "We are never alone," she whispered, as fireflies danced like tiny souls finally free.